don't like the tariff. What does it do to prices? Jesse. Not everybody agrees for that reason. Yes, it does actually raise prices. Okay, back to that American system. One more time. Give me one part of it. Once again, give me one part of the American system. Freedom of speech. That's First Amendment. I'll go with that. You're in the ballpark. Yeah, I went in to try to save it, and it won't save. Just Aiden's absent. Fulcrum. Thank you. Bye. Tried. One part. Speech. Well, it's First Amendment. Amy. Fake system. Keep going.
Infrastructure improvement.
And
Tariffs, that's protective.
Oh my god. Oh my. Is that what that noise was? That's scary. I like that. No.
I have no life. This is my life. Playing around with sound bites. Look at poor Alice. She's like, oh, are you kidding me? No. Okay, on we go. Everybody say aw.
Aww. Wait, is it like a cute aw or like
that poor guy?
No.
Like that's sad? Aww.
His economic backbone is breaking from the tariffs.
Okay, well the way I say it.
Now, I get it. Now, with all seriousness, I want you to understand the South is not like this tariff, and you need to understand that's another reason for sectionalism. Yes, the Civil War is going to involve slavery. In most cases, it's going to be about slavery. But I also want you to know there are economic issues, and this is one of them, okay? The South thought they had been ripped off by this. And again, if you're going to ask me why would two senators who were Southerners support it so much, I don't have a good answer for you. They knew that it would be hard economically on the South. They knew that. I guess they thought maybe the banking and the infrastructure was more important. I don't have a good answer for you. Okay? Okay, so the Bank of the United States, stabilized currency, rein in risky state and local banks. And let's just answer those questions. How would the National Bank keep the system running smoothly? Go ahead. Nationwide currency, yes. And what would the bank aid? Anybody have that one? Go ahead. Loans and establishing credit. Yes, make sure you have that. That's on the first page at the bottom. On the middle column, down towards the bottom, third from the bottom. Anybody have anything else? Loans, credit are the two biggies. Okay, let's start with this. Sarah.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
Remember, the first bank of the U.S. had expired in 1811. It was not in existence during the War of 1812. Not having a bank was one of the reasons why the people felt they shouldn't fight the War of 1812, and it was a driving force for a new bank, the second bank of the U.S.
And whenever you hear National Bank, Bank of the U.S., that's what it means, okay? They're the same thing. I just want you to understand that. National Bank, Bank of the U.S., it all goes back to Hamilton, which was chartered in 1791, and it expired in 1811. So we have a Bank of the U.S. Today we would call it the Federal Reserve Bank. Okay, if you look at your dollar bills, treasury notes, things like that, that's what it's called. Okay, and that's it there on the bottom. If you look at the left, the Federal Reserve Bank is actually a banker's bank. It's where banks actually get their money. Believe it or not, if you own Mid-Penn Bank, you go to the Federal Reserve, borrow money from them, and then you run your bank with it. That's how it works. in the back of your mind, you don't have to write it down now, but in the back of your mind, keep in mind that Andrew Jackson did not like this. Okay? Thought they were corrupt, etc. Okay, on we go. So the second bank finally recharted 1816 for 20 years. When it comes up for another recharter, lease, renewal, whatever you want to call it, Andrew Jackson will be the president. Then again, keep in mind Andrew Jackson is on what currency?
$20 bill.
$20 bill, yes. Not by his choice by any means. Okay. Moving right along here. Third part of the American system, internal improvements. And let's discuss the first question. Why is transportation the most important part of industrialization? You discussed the Industrial Revolution last year in world history class. It starts over in England for the most part, spreads to the United States. When it comes to the United States, you're going to probably think of people like Rockefeller, Carnegie, Stanford, the railroad, the oil, the steel industry. Why is transportation the most important? Gracie, what do you got?
Well, it helps to move goods that are made, so maybe like for that reason.
Okay, so your finished goods helps to move them. Go ahead.
Transportation also allows for the movement of ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, technologies, ideas can move. Yes.
Me?
Georgia? Somebody
Right,
answer.
Gonna have to like expand.
Help expansion, yes. Something else. Amy?
An easier method of transportation helps the goods get faster.
Yes. And all of that, what we're saying there, has to do with after the fact. I also want you to think before the fact. Okay? Before the fact. Anybody see what I'm getting at? Why would it be important? What do you have to get to the factories? Good.
Workers.
You have to get the workers to the factory. Think of like metal industries, great example. You also have to get raw materials to the factories. Okay? So all of those are vital. The big one in this chapter is going to be the canal industry. Okay? So develop a system of internal improvements, roads, canals, some railroads, but the big one's going to be canals. Now, right here, right now, while you're writing that down, I want you to think of this. The railroads actually are going to put the canals out of business for the most part. Not exactly. We still have canals today, but nowhere near like we used to. Okay? The railroads are going to eventually put the canals out of business, but that doesn't come till later in the 1800s. Infrastructure deals with mostly transportation systems. Okay, so take a look at this map. Mostly in the Northeast is what you're going to call where most of the canals are. Notice northern, the northern part, northwestern part of New York. You see that Erie Canal, that's a big one. You also have the railroad lines, okay, as well. All right, so the bottom of 152, which part of the country had the most canals? Ella, what do you got?
Northeast.
North and east, yes. Anybody get this one? Why did Monroe veto the road and canal projects? Go ahead.
The Constitution didn't specifically say to spend money on like roads and canals.
He really did, yeah, and absolutely. He really thought it was an overreach. Okay, he really thought it was an overreach of Government power. So what would that be that Monroe would have to use, everybody? Implied, yes. And he felt that was too much power in the hands of the federal government. Okay, so we're down on the first page there at the bottom. Let's do the question and then we'll read the screen. Well, I'll tell you what, let's read the screen first and then we'll take a look at the question. From the handout, Panic of 1819. Now, whenever you see panic, we should think of an economic what? Depression, yes. Just like in 1929, the big depression. We call them depressions now, but before they were just called panics. Why? Because people panic. Right? If you have money in the stock market and we have an economic depression, you're going to panic. The stockbrokers would say, don't panic, it'll come back. Easy for them to say when they're not the ones losing all the money. Of course, they might be if they're the brokers. Anyway, let's read the screen. Maggie, if you would, please.
From the handout, first page, Panic of 1819. Hit the U.S. mostly caused by overspeculation in Western lands. The second bank of the U.S. tightened credit. Tightening credit means that they wouldn't loan money to people. In an effort to control inflation, state banks closed, value of money deflated, fell, and fractured era of good feelings. As a result, the Bank of the U.S. became unpopular after being blamed for the panic of 1819, and suspicion of corruption and mismanagement haunted it until its charter expired in 1836. Jackson fought against this institution throughout his presidency, proclaiming it to be an unconstitutional extension of the federal government and a tool that rich capitalists used to corrupt American society. It was to blame for the panic of 1819.
Okay, and let's take a look at your question there. Who was to blame for the panic of 1819? That's at the bottom of the first page there. Ellis, so you're in first.
The second bank of the U.S.
Okay, and do you have any reasons why?
I said because people place the blame on them for what do they call it? Tightening credit.
Make sure you have that, tightening credit. And what that means is that if somebody doesn't have good credit, they don't loan you money, okay? They were not loaning money, tightening credit. Now, if you think about it, if the banks don't loan money, think about if that would happen today. What would that mean for us if the banks don't loan money? How many people can actually afford a house paying cash for it? If you can, God bless you. How about afford a car? So if the banks aren't loaning money, think this through. What does that mean? Go ahead.
The consumers don't have an opportunity to purchase a lot of goods.
And if nobody's buying, nobody's what?
Selling.
There goes our
Market economy.
There you go. Okay, and that's what I want you to understand. So the banks are tightening credit, and you can't really blame the banks because they don't want to just keep loaning to people. Put yourself in their position. If you loan a lot of money to people and they don't pay it back, you're in trouble, okay? So it's not all on the bank here, and I don't want you to think that. The bank cannot engage in risky loans. That's what happened in 2008, okay? All right, so what else happened there at the bottom there? We have the bank. What else? So what were some of the issues? If nobody's buying, nobody's selling, so nobody what? So there's another word I'm looking for here. I don't know how to say it. Think about it. If nobody's selling, then what happens to companies?
They go bankrupt.
And what happens to the workers?
They get laid off.
Okay, you're right. And what's that called?
Unemployed.
Unemployed, yeah. So you got a lot of unemployed. You got bankruptcies. Make sure you note that, okay? And the same thing happened in 1929. A little different, though. A lot of that had to do with run-on banks, but we'll talk about that. Okay. So we have a panic of 1819, and I want you to understand, and you can put this down there. This starts to, well, word it however you want. I like to say it this way. This is the beginning of the end of the era of good feeling. Okay? This started to end the era of good feeling. Now, the fighting over slavery is also going to be a driving force there. Okay. So moving right along. What party ceased to exist? Federalists, good. We're on page 2 now. What party starting to divide? Democratic Republican, yes. We see a difference there. So let's go to the right side. Although the nation was united under a single political party, division emerged, resulting in the eventual development of new parties. 1824, put that year down. The Democratic Party really was the only party until we get to the Whig Party, which we'll talk about. Democratic Party, put this down. Democratic Party supported slavery. I want you to know that. The Democratic Party were ardent supporters of slavery. The Whig Party is going to come along here. Actually, Henry Clay is one of them. Now, they're not necessarily opposed to slavery. I don't want you to think that. But they are opposed to the Democratic Party, and that's as far as I'm going to go right now. I'll go into detail later, like right now. So you have two parties, the Democrat and the Whigs. Why Whigs? Goes back to royalty when the royal class wore wigs. Simply put, that's what it is. True story. But I want you to understand the Whigs and the Democratic Party oppose each other. The Whig Party mostly opposed Andrew Jackson, who was a Democrat. All right, let's read the screen here to learn a little bit more about this, these two new parties. Bryson, if you would, please.
Whig Party is born in 1834. Political opponents of President Andrew Jackson organized a new party to contest Jacksonian Democrats nationally in the states. Guided by their most prominent leader, Henry Clay, they called themselves Whigs. The name of the English anti-monarchist party, the better to stigmatize the seventh president as King Andrew.
So even though they had the Whigs that was part of the royal party, they called themselves that because they were actually anti-monarchy. And they said that Andrew Jackson acted too much like a monarch. They called him King Andrew. So I do want you to know that, okay?
They were immediately derided by the Jacksonian Democrats as a party devoted to the interests of wealth and aristocracy. A charge they were never able to shake completely. Yet during the party's brief life, it managed to win support from diverse economic groups in all sections and to hold its own in presidential elections. Okay, so I do want you to know the Whig Party, they were anti-monarchy, anti-Jackson. Now, at the same time, it wouldn't hurt to keep this in your mind, that Jackson actually prided himself as being the hero of the common man, not monarchy. But don't we always see this when political parties fight with each other? Have we not talked about mudslinging? Do we not see mudslinging in politics still? I think we can all agree with that. Okay, so you have the Democratic Party and you have the Whig Party. And they are opposed to each other. Just like the Federalist Party and the Democratic Republicans. Okay, so what were the major court cases during the era of good feelings? And let's take a look at this. Major court cases during the era of good feeling, that's at the bottom. All right, first of all, we need to understand this guy, John Marshall. He's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. His statue is outside the Supreme Court building. He is considered one of the most influential justices ever. He was the Chief Justice. Now, in a lot of cases, the Chief Justice does have a lot to say, but the Chief Justice still only has one vote, okay? Today, the Chief Justice is John Roberts, by the way. Now again, emphasis on the federal government. Let's just read the left side to understand it a little bit more. Amy, if you would, please.
The Marshall Court refers to the time period where John Marshall served on the Supreme Court while upholding Federalist beliefs. During this period, the federal government's power and influence over states grew due to Marshall's decision in key court cases.
Now, it's called the Marshall Court because it's called that, the name of the Chief Justice. Like right now, we have the Roberts Court. One time we had the Warren Court. Okay? Kind of interesting when you look at the Supreme Court, okay, and you look at, you know, the influence that they have. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. First one there. Let's read the box real quick, like. Go, Kayla, go.
1803. Appointment of midnight justices by John Adams rejected by Jefferson. Supreme Court decided constitutional of Judiciary Act. Court ruled delivery of appointments not duty of court and declares Judiciary Act unconstitutional. Significance of ruling. Give the court the power of judicial review.
And what's the answer?
Marbury versus Madison.
Marbury versus Madison. You got it. Marbury versus Madison. And the key there is they ruled that they cannot enforce their own ruling. Remember that. It gave them the power of judicial review. They reviewed their own ruling and said we can't enforce our own ruling. Keeping that in mind. All right. Fletcher versus Peck. Go, Maggie, please.
1810 Fletcher versus Peck. Georgia legislature canceled contract that granted land to speculators as part of bribe. As Supreme Court
Yep.
ruled deal was legal and the state couldn't nullify it even if it was gained with bribe. Significance of rule established the principle that state laws are invalid in conflict with the Constitution.
And that's what you want to understand. If a state law violates the Constitution, it is unconstitutional and therefore is not a law. Okay? State laws are invalid if they conflict with the Constitution. That's what you want to understand there. Okay? State laws cannot conflict with the Constitution. All right. Martin versus Hunter's lease. Supreme Court has authority over state courts. And let's take a minute and read through this. Jesse, please.
Loyalist Fairfax had his hand seized after the Revolutionary War. His left land to relative following his death, but Virginia seized it. Court overturned state court ruling. Peace Treaty and Treaty of Paris both stated Loyalist land would be returned. Supreme Court's right to overrule a state court. Okay,
very good. So the Supreme Court can overrule state courts. So the Supreme Court has the say. All right, final say. All right, McCulloch versus Maryland. And that's your next case. Let's read 1819. Let's just read right there on the right side of your handout, that is. 1819. Georgia, please.
Maryland enacted
Well, let's read the one from your handout
yeah,
first.
sorry.
Then I'll go through it.
Maryland wanted the tax branch of National Bank. Court ruled against state. Significance of ruling upheld the right of Congress to charter a national bank, thus putting into national law the doctrine of implied powers.
And circle that implied powers. Okay, so here's what happened. The federal government said we're putting a bank in Maryland. Okay, real simple. The federal government says we're putting a bank in Maryland. Maryland says, no, you're not. Federal government says, yes, we are. No, you're not. Yes, we are. No, you're not. Yes, we are. So Maryland says, fine, go ahead and do it. But if you do it, we're taxing you. Who's going to win? Who do you think should win? What do you think? Georgia, who should win? That's right. This big bully federal government? What do you think? Why so?
Well, because they don't want it in there in the state, so they can put it somewhere else.
That's right. But if you do, we're going to tax you. Bryson.
Personal opinion, I think Maryland should win, but it's the federal government, so they always kind of find a way of winning everything. So I feel like in some shape or form, they're going to get their way.
According to John Marshall, they will. All right, so let's read some facts here. Gracie, please. McCulloch, yep.
McCulloch versus Maryland. Maryland enacted a
Statute, meaning law.
imposing a tax on all banks operating in Maryland not chartered by the state. The Second Bank of the United States was established by an 1816 Act of Congress. McCulloch, the cashier of the Baltimore branch of the Bank of the United States, refused to pay the tax. Maryland sued McCulloch for failing to pay the taxes due.
Okay, so basically what it means is McCulloch sent a tax bill to the federal government. Okay? Using a loose interpretation of the Constitution, Marshall ruled that the federal government had implied power to create a second bank of the U.S., and the state could not tax a federal institution because the power to tax is the power to destroy, and federal law superseded state laws. That's what I want you to understand. Now, let me ask you this, smart people. Do you see something maybe contradictory up there? Look at how the federal Supreme Court ruled. Do you see something that might be contradictory? Ella, so you're here first.
I'm just looking at the quote. The power to tax is the power to destroy. What about the tariffs and all the taxes that they place on citizens already?
I think a lot of people would ask that same question. So it's okay for the federal government to do it, but nobody else. What do you think, Maggie?
I mean, sometimes in life there are people who have more authority than you. They do things that you don't want and you don't really have to say. But in this case, I don't know who should really do it, but that's what happened. So.
Yeah, and you can definitely see a lot of irony there. Okay, McCulloch versus Maryland upheld that necessary and proper clause, which is the use of implied powers. Okay, you can use implied powers. That's what it means, necessary and proper. The federal government can take acts which it feels is necessary and proper. It wouldn't hurt to note that. The outcome of the case is necessary and proper, and if necessary and proper means using implied powers, then it's okay to do so. Federal government can take all acts which it feels are necessary and proper. Is that scary, Evelyn?
Yes.
Why?
Because then they can do things that the states don't want them to do.
It's not easily defined, is it? Necessary and proper. What exactly is necessary and proper?
Whatever they feel like it applies to.
I think what's necessary and proper is we have a constitutional amendment against a designated hitter. We should go to school in the summer and have off for archery season.
Yeah.
But that's necessary and proper. Now, obviously, that's a little bit of extreme there. But how do you determine what's necessary and proper? What's necessary and proper for Sarah might be different than what Amy says. And how do you decide this? Think about that. Now think about that. That's your deep thought of the day. Think about that. Go ahead and meditate. Gracie says what's necessary and proper is to shoot archery. Jesse agrees. Sarah, what do you think? No, playing piano. Ella says no, basketball. What is necessary and proper? Volleyball. Being a Steelers fan.
No.
Wait till I grade your paper.
Just like the Dallas Cowboys.
Okay, let's move on. Go ahead. A comment on that, Bryson?
What?
You have a comment?
Not really.
Well, give us something profound. I said meditate.
Sure, golf's necessary.
There you go. Okay. Dartmouth versus Woodward. Here's the deal. Dartmouth versus Woodward. Dartmouth is an Ivy League school. You probably heard of it.
Yes.
Good. Guess what? The school's doing very well. Very well.
That's good for them.
So the state says we're taking over.
Oh.
State says that we want it. We're going to make it a university. No longer a private school. We're going to run the show. Why? Because the state wants the money. So here's what happens. Dartmouth versus Woodward. Let's read what's on your handout there. Jesse, go ahead, please.
State wanted to make Dartmouth public school. Charter was from King George III for private. Court rules charter cannot be changed by the state significance of ruling by forbidding the state legislature to alter the college charter, establish the principle that charters were contracts which could not be impaired.
Okay, so here's what I want you to know. Dartmouth actually had, it says charter. The bottom line is Dartmouth had the deed for the property. So they owned it. That's what I want you to understand. When they say deed today, we say, or when they say charter today, we say deed. Dartmouth owns the property. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, what about eminent domain? Can't the state take over? Yeah, today, yes. Okay? All right, so let's read through this. The contract for a private corporation could not be older. Here's what I want you to understand. Dartmouth had a contract. That's the key outcome of this case. Make sure you note that. Write that real big. Dartmouth had a contract. Did you ever hear someone say, be careful what you sign? That's a contract. And here's what I want you to know. The outcome of this case is still alive and well, and that's what I'm hoping you're catching from all of these cases. They're not just in some dusty old, older than you textbook. These are still alive and well. And look at those last two lines. Kaylee, please.
Charters and contracts are protected under the contract clause of the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, and here's what comes out of this case, and this is what you got to know. A contract is a legal binding document, and both sides are required by law to uphold its terms. That's what you want to know. Still alive and well. You sign a contract, you better read the fine print. In this case, whenever you sign a contract, I want you to think Dartmouth versus Woodward. Careful what you sign. Contract is legal binding. Okay, assignment for Friday. You can see that on there. Pick up from there tomorrow.
I don't think I've ever watched that movie. I never
Like, related to it, that shows
The Mrs. Dunning was like, where's Woody? I was like, I don't know what it's about.